Imams of this deen, Imams of the Hadith. And there are so many of his quotes that are mentioned in the books and with regarding to his life, which is also, it's important to get to know it. And he first studied from his father, Sa'id ibn Masruq. And he was Sa'id ibn Masruq, that's his father. And he used to, the ulama, they called him that he is thiqah, he's a trustworthy, and he was one that the people of the 6 books of hadith had narrated hadith from him, meaning his father. So his father was a muhaddith among those, the narrators of the hadith. So he was seeking knowledge from his father. And one of the beautiful things that his mother, the mother of Sufyaan Ath-Thawri, she told him, "Utlub al-ilm wa ana akfika bimighzali." That she told him, seek knowledge and I will take care of your expenses by the mighzal is the sewing. Yeah, the sewing thing that that when they make clothing or carpets.
Decorative sewing.
Right, sewing. So she's basically was doing that so that her son would seek knowledge. Embroidering, something like this now. So that he would seek knowledge. This is how mothers were. The same thing was said to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Many of the scholars of Islam that they didn't have their fathers or their fathers died when they were young, and the mothers take it upon themselves to have the children to seek the knowledge, which is the most valuable thing. And of course it's not wasted, because someone like him that we mention his name many times when we read the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it's definitely such a great deed. And she told her son, "Oh my son, if you write 10 letters, do you see in yourself more of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your forbearance and respect that you see in yourself? If you don't find that, know that these 10 letters would harm you and won't benefit you." Right? So she was telling him that the knowledge that he's learning, it has to affect his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his forbearing and his good manners and everything. Otherwise, what's the benefit of knowledge? It's not to increase the amount of information that he has, it's for him to increase his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things that was said about him, Mubarak ibn Sa'id, he said that he saw Asim ibn Najud, one of the reciters of the Quran, and he's a famous one. When we say the recitation of the Quran, Hafs an Asim, right? This is Asim. And he was a famous sheikh, of course. He would go to Sufyaan Ath-Thawri and ask him for fatwas, and he would say, "Ya Sufyaan, أتيتنا صغيرا وأتيناك كبيرا." That he would say that you used to come to us when you were young, meaning Asim was his sheikh. And he says, "And now I come to you when you are big." Right? So the sheikh is learning from the student after the student became a knowledgeable person. Of course, with his travelings and wanting to different parts of the world to study the deen of Islam, and he was among those who were young and reached a high level of knowledge. And this is something that is also common among the ulama, like Imam Malik, for example, rahimahullah. He was 21 years old when he was sitting for fatwa, and that of course is the means of the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when he was that young and he was given the fatwa, and when we say fatwa, it's not just someone knowing the verdicts of a madhab and he's saying it. No, fatwa meaning this high level that a person can reach. And when he was asked, is it permissible for a person to do that, he said he never sat for the fatwa unless he was given the permission by Yahya ibn Sa'id, meaning his sheikh, right? Yahya ibn Sa'id, one of the imam of the hadith, and others, and Rabi'at al-Ra'i, they're the ones that told him that you are qualified to sit and you give the verdict to the people. And then he said, Imam Malik said something very important. He said, لا ينبغي لرجل أن يبذل نفسه إلا بعد أن يسأل أهل العلم. That it's not permissible, it's not good for a person, for a man, to يبذل نفسه, meaning that he would give his knowledge, meaning spread his knowledge, unless he would ask the people of knowledge. People of knowledge would give him the permission that you are qualified to spread the deen of Allah, to teach people and so on. So it's not something that they were competing to be in such a situation, that this is their ulama, they would ask them to do such a thing because of the level of ilm that they reached. The people at this time, they used to put him on a higher level when it comes to memorization than even Imam Malik and Shu'bah. And he was someone that was famous, that he had a madhab, but his students did not take his madhab strongly like the other imams did. And there is Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Sufyaan Ath-Thawri, right? Sufyaan Ath-Thawri is of a higher level, meaning that he is closer than Sufyan ibn Uyayna. And when Sufyan ibn Uyayna would be asked, or he asked him, Sufyan Ath-Thawri asked Sufyan ibn Uyayna, why don't you teach the people? He said, as long as you are alive, I cannot do that. Out of the respect of having the Shaykh is alive, that means how can he speak in the presence of his Shaykh? Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, also one of the Imam of the Hadith. These names, if we read the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you'll find it repeated all the time. He said that we will be with Sufyan Ath-Thawri, and as if he is standing in the Day of Judgment waiting for the reckoning from the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said we won't have the courage to speak to him out of the respect that we had to him. So we would mention some of the Hadith indirectly. So when we mention something about the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in his presence, all of a sudden this status that he would be in of the khushu' would go away, and then he would start saying حدثنا and so on, and he would mention the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, that we just talked about him, he said that I would sit and to learn from Sufyan Ath-Thawri, and he would mention the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, to the extent of which that I would say, this is what Abdullah ibn Mubarak is saying, there is nothing of his knowledge is left. That means this is all of the knowledge that he has because of the too many things that he would say. And then I would say to him again, and I would say the same thing. That means he is full of the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed unto him. He said, and this is something that Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi said about him, that Sufyan Ath-Thawri said, ما بلغني حديثا قط إلا عملت به ولو مرة واحدة. There is not even one hadith that reaches me that he got to know a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, unless I would act according to it even at least one time. Right? They were not learning the hadith for the information, but they're acting according to it. And they would sometimes get into extremes in this, because sometimes the hadith might not relate to them, but they would make sure they would act according to what the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ doing something and so on. With all this knowledge, when people would ask him questions, especially in matters of divorce, that sometimes we become in haste in responding and saying, yeah, divorce occurred or not occurred and things like this, he would be quiet in many of these cases, and he would say that these are furuj, these are private parts, or these are things that are haram. How can I be a reason or a mean for a person to fall into haram or to live in haram? Such a serious matter when it comes to the matters of fatwa. One of the narrators of the hadith, he said that every time I would sit with Sufyan Ath-Thawri in any gathering, that I would remember death. And I've never seen anyone remembering death or mentioning death more than him. This is applying the order of the Prophet ﷺ to remember death a lot, and this is how it makes the person steadfast on the deen of Islam. And one of the quotes that he said, ليس الزهد في لبس الغليظ وأكل الخشن ولكن الزهد قصر الأمل وارتقاب الموت. He said, الزهد, or to be in abstinence, is not when a person would wear thick clothing or eating rough food. The zuhd is something that is done by the heart. It's basically when a person has a short hope of this life and waiting for the moment of death. This is the mean, or the mean understanding, or the right understanding of the word of zuhd. One of the things that someone is going to travel, he would tell him, do not go out with someone that is more richer than you, have more money than you. And he would say, if you go with someone that has more money than you, he would harm you if you are equal with him in spending. And if you spend less than him, you would look like you are a miser or greedy. And he says, go with the one that is like you. And of course, it depends on the situation that a person is in. And when he would be in Hajj, someone with him, he would say that he would never quit enjoining good and forbidding evil, calling people, advising people, and things like that in the trip of Hajj. And one of the things that he said, beautify the ilm and the hadith by yourself, and do not beautify yourself with it. Do not just seek the knowledge just to have it for your own self. It's to act according to what you seek. Did we see when he was born? He was born in the year 97 of the Hijrah, and he died in Al-Basra in Iraq in Sha'ban in the year 161 of the Hijrah. And he was ordered to be the Qadi, or the judge, and he refused, and he had to hide actually and run away, and to be a fugitive than to be a judge, because of the fear that they had that being a judge is something that is, huge responsibility. It doesn't mean that they would stay away from the responsibility. They know that someone else can take care of it, so they would push it away from themselves if there's someone else that can take this responsibility. No, it's not organized as it should be, but it's just something. Looking into these types of things that's mentioned about that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among the company of these people, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.